Welcome, everyone. This is going to be our St. George's Day, May Day double feature special. I'm
Uh,
joined by Friar Tuck himself. Such an honor, sir.
yeah.
Thank you for being here and having fun with our May Day George's Day quiz.
Are you suggesting that I'm a drunkard?
Well, Friar Tuck was not always so, but
Oh, this is true.
he's certainly always jolly. But we will get
Yeah.
into why Friar Tuck or why that legend is associated with this time of the
Oh,
year.
oh, I see. Okay, go on. Well, just briefly, we should explain. I'm trying to talk in a very particular context.
Yes, please tell
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah. Well, that is voicing him in a computer game. So, I was invited to replace a voice. And I won't, I wouldn't comment on the previous voice, it had been commented on that people preferred a different voice, possibly for that character,
And
and
it just happened to be you.
just happened to be me. Yeah, yeah, and just going, oh, hello, Robin. Oh, yeah, that kind of thing. So, anyway, yeah,
Mark is available for all your voiceover and narration needs. Please find him on Fiverr.
yeah, yeah. Please do.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, please
So,
do.
so we have our retinue here
Mm.
of characters. We have the May Queen, the May King. We've got some dragons. We have Robin himself.
Hmm.
So first question, though, we're going to get into St. George's Day, which just happened in certain parts of the world, but there is a reason why they're connected and why we're doing them together. So first order of business, Mark, do you have your pen and paper to get ready for the quiz?
Yes.
Okay, so for those who would like to play along at home, mark yourselves, give yourself a little tick, and each
Yes.
question we're going to see if everybody gets it right. So, Mark, your first
Yeah.
question is: was Saint George a real person?
Yes, he was.
Ooh, maybe 0.5 on this one, Mark, because we actually don't know.
Oh, oh, okay,
Yes,
okay.
we actually don't know. According to Dr. Samantha Riches, who is the top scholar on St. George and has written many books on him, everything we know about St. George was something someone else invented. One of the first churches to lay claim to his origin is in Syria, but we don't even know if that's the same St. George because there have been
Oh,
other misappropriations throughout history. We
hmm.
know that certainly he was a holy man, but
Okay.
that's about it. We don't know anything. His claim to martyrdom comes in the 7th century
Hmm.
from a story of St. George ripping down an edict to ban Christianity, but we have no evidence as to whether this event really happened. If he was real, he might have lived and died around the year 303 AD, which is when Diocletian launched the last persecution of the Christian church, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
Many medieval saints who became important in early Christianity were also popping up around this time. So this is when legends started to get going. Mid 4th century, George is mentioned in a text from modern day Syria. The beginnings of his narrative are in a Greek hagiography, which is identified by Hippolyte de la Halle, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, in the 5th century. An earlier work by Eusebius, Church History, written in the 4th century, contributed to the legends surrounding George's early years, but again, it didn't name George specifically or provide any details. The early cult of the saint was localized in Lydda, which is in Palestine. The
Hmm.
first description of Lydda as a pilgrimage site where George's relics were venerated is in De Situ Terrae Sanctiae, by the Archdeacon Theodosius, written between 518 and 530 AD. The life of Saint Theodore, written in the 7th century, mentions the veneration of relics of the Saint of Cappadocia, and again, he and Theodore are linked as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Bede mentions Saint George amongst the martyrs by the 8th century. I think I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly. I apologize for my Anglo-Saxon. Jorgeslide is an
Okay.
adaptation of his legend in Old High German. So
Right.
not even Old Anglo-Saxon, Old High German. Jorgeslide or Georgeslied was composed toward the end of the 9th century and was partially transcribed by the year 1000. While a person devoted to Christianity lived and died around that time and was seemingly named George, this is all we really know about his life.
I've got a question about this may come up. I often do this to you, don't I? But was he called George
Oh,
in the
that's
same way that people talk about Mary, for example, and John, and so on and so forth, that from you know biblical times,
That's a great question, and I actually don't know because in
right?
some of the texts, his name he's hinted at. His name is not mentioned, but
Mm,
no, he would not be gay or
no.
George as we would know him. No, it would be the George that comes from the ancient Greek, so it would
Mm,
be what their equivalent would have been.
right.
And then
Okay.
again, depending on the text that mentions him, they might have called him something else. So
Mm,
I actually don't know.
okay. Okay.
So
Interesting.
knowing this. Now I've made the
Mhm.
rest pretty easy for you, Mark.
Okay.
Knowing this, question two, was St. George English?
Well, well, as we learned from some very astute folks on a march in London, St. George apparently taught the Eng. No, no, no. He wasn't English. No.
No, absolutely not. Not in any shape or form was he ever
No.
English, not at all.
No.
There are reasons why people think he is, but no, he never was. As for where he was really from, that is debated. Some believe he was from
Hmm.
Lydda, since that's where his cult center sprang up.
Hmm.
Some believe he was from modern day Syria, based on the oldest text that we have mention of him. But as for him being from modern day Turkey, which is also popular, as some scholars once believed, probably not.
No.
So maybe
Yeah.
Syria, maybe Lydda is probably the answer. In any case, he is from the Middle East. That's how it is. In the late Roman world, he was already a major saint on 3 continents, so he obviously was not English first. He only became associated with England in the 7th century.
Hmm.
There was a cult around him in Britain in the early Middle Ages, but not in England. You want to take a guess, Mark, where he was first popularized in the UK? Don't be biased. Don't say it. Say the other thing.
No, no. I'm gonna say Scotland.
Oh, very good, Mark. Yes.
Yes.
There was
Yes.
there was activity. Yes, there was. He was very popular in Scotland in the early Middle Ages. Some try
Okay.
to make it seem like George came back to England via the Crusades or the Norman Conquest, which is a very popular theory.
Uh-huh.
But the church, no, but it's not true. The Church of Saint George at Doncaster, which is obviously not Scotland, but was founded before the Norman Conquest. It subsequently burnt down later on, obviously,
Right.
and was
Okay.
rededicated much later. Aelfrich, the Anglo-Saxon Bishop of York, included the life of St. George in his Lives of Saints collection, 3 centuries before George became patron saint of England. His name appears in the liturgical calendar in 9th century and was adopted by Edward III as a patron of the Order of the Garter in 1348.
Right. Interesting. Interesting. So, and again, we might be able to touch on this. Why the fondness for George? And
That is a really great question.
mm,
Why him? Why is it him?
yeah.
Especially when it's not like St. Patrick. You know, St. Patrick, we have writings in his own hand, which have nothing to do with his later myths,
No.
which I find very interesting. And why St. George? Well, we will touch on this briefly when we talk
Hmm.
about how he did become patron saint of England. Um, but because there were other saints that were around him, like Saint
Mm,
Theodore, who had very similar stories. So I think honestly it's the same kind of dichotomy between Patrick and Palladius, whereas Palladius was first, who went to
mm,
Ireland and he had more stories around him. But for whatever reason, Patrick's history just clung on,
mm,
and that's it. So we'll try to answer that question as we go, because that is a great question. Why specifically George?
mm.
So question 3, was
Okay.
the story of St. George pagan one? And we say pagan as meaning pre-Christian, not
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
pagan.
yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
In the same way when we say cult, we mean it in the ancient Christian sense. We don't mean it in the modern sense. Yeah, just
No,
in
no,
case
no,
people don't know.
no. Or in the fatang sense, no. Um, I, I would like it to possibly be because obviously there are aspects of his story that have that sort of grand heroic stuff going on. So yeah, I yes.
Ah!
Oh no, no! You were nodding along with me. Oh,
The bamboozle. No,
yeah, exactly.
because a lot of those pagan aspects of the story come much later in his myths. So no, some
Oh,
scholars
okay.
think that his later stories were copied from older myths, but not his earlier stories.
Right. Okay.
George's slaying of the dragon is akin to the legend of Perseus, who is said to have rescued Andromeda from the sea monster near Lydda. Again,
Mm,
everything is centered around Lydda, which is interesting. The
yeah.
Coptic version of Saint George's legend, in 1888, estimated to be a source based on 5th and 6th century stories.
Hmm.
Like names like Governor Didanius, the persecutor of St. George, as the dragon of the abyss. But again,
Mm,
there's no pagan basis for this. The
okay.
Greek myth with similar elements of the legend between Bellerophon and the Chimera. St. George's myths as well, the later ones, or I should say the earlier ones, might have been partially lifted from St. Theodore's stories, who came before him. It was not uncommon for early Christian saints to share legends and miracles. According to St. Theodore's legend, St. Theodore was a legionary in the Roman army who suffered martyrdom by immolation in Turkey, which is maybe where they get the connection with Turkey from.
Mm, mm,
Again, under Diocletian, the same thing. Venerated by the 4th century, St. Theodore became a prominent warrior saint during the Middle Ages, attracted a great deal of additional legends, including accounts of the battle against the dragon.
right.
Iconographic representations of St. Theodore as a horseman come from Macedonia, and if genuine, date from around 6th or 7th century. Here, Theodore is not slaying a dragon, but instead he's holding a dragon standard. A
Mm,
poorly preserved wall painting in the, please excuse my Turkish,
mhm.
Yelani Kilisi, the snake church in Turkey,
Okay.
that depicts two saints, Theodore and George, attacking the dragon together, has been tentatively dated to 10th century.
Right.
Similar example, showing the three equestrian saints, Demetrius, Theodore, and George, from the, again, please excuse my Macedonian, Zoudakis Piki, uh, near the modern village of Colchida, dated to 9th or 10th century. So again, all of these are much later. Any pagan sort of aspects are much later. Saint
Mm,
Michael is also depicted with a dragon, as well as Saint Philip the Apostle. So no, there is no pagan anything.
interesting. Interesting. The uh yeah, the whole dragon thing is often um used in modern UK, modern United Kingdom, to sort of to really big up the rivalry and at times actually quite toxic relationship between England and Wales. And this
Yeah, yeah.
idea so sorry, for the people at home who don't know, obviously dragon is iconic of Wales. The red dragon over my shoulder I got from back home in Wales. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting how so for example in Newcastle Cathedral, just up the road from where I'm sitting, there was an image of George with his, if I remember correctly, his lance through the dragon, his foot on the dragon's neck, but set in actually the landscape of Tynemouth Priory, so a very local landscape. And crucially, uh, I was on a walking tour of the building, and someone said, "Oh, is that slaying the Welsh dragon?" And no, it was actually. First of all, no, not at all. But I mean, not least because I think it's green and or blue or
George
green.
never ever slayed the Welsh dragon in any of
No,
his myths. No.
no, exactly. But it's interesting that's such a strong association. But also, curiously enough, he went on to explain that the tour guide did that the artist had actually painted it as a representation of the victory of, uh, I guess, the British Empire over the the Prussians and others in the First World War.
Hmm.
So this you can see how it comes about because George becomes associated with a martial victory over whatever it is that he's killed in the painting.
Yeah.
Um, and so I guess you can see why George's cross and the nation next door having a dragon on their flag. You can see why some people make that connection.
Yeah,
Um,
I
mm,
do understand, but
mm,
there is
no,
no connection whatsoever. No.
no, not at all. No, and but in that sense, I find it very unhelpful actually, because another, I mean, another related issue is football fans. The number of people who seem to find
Oh,
George and Crusader imagery in particular completely harmless is interesting. So at the last World Cup, for example, there were people uh, turning up. Obviously, it was a World Cup held in the Middle East, Qatar, um, and people
oh
were turning
yes,
up
I did hear about that. Yeah.
in this garb, and there was a group who were briefly arrested, basically because they, for people in that part of the world, the Crusaders are still associated with stories of cannibalism,
This is
and
true. However, as we are going to get to,
mm,
St. George's cross is used on many flags, not
yes,
just, yeah, not just in
yeah,
England.
mm,
And actually, St. George's popularity is most in the Middle East, which we will also get to.
interesting,
Yeah, we will also
interesting.
get to. Yeah. So
So, sorry, yeah, go on.
how then did St. George become patron saint of England? Do you want to take a guess, Mark?
Oh, okay, okay. I reckon what happened was there was a person who was traveling along somewhere, let's say in the north of France, and they had some swatches of wallpaper on them.
I
And
love this already.
this English guy comes over and goes, "Right then, we're thinking of annexing Calais, and what you've got there it belongs to us now." And he's like, "Please do not annex me. I am going home." Um, and in his coat was a Saint George cross, which was actually going to be, oddly enough, a checkered pattern, which was not finished yet. And no, I don't know. I have no idea.
I love this. I love the story because there are elements of it that are actually kind of close.
Okay,
But
okay.
no. So Saint George was officially canonized in 494 AD by Pope Gelasius, but
Mhm.
he only became a patron saint of England in the 13th century. He was
Right.
probably not even recognized as England's patron saint until after the reign of Edward III, because Edward made him patron of the newly founded Most Noble Order of the Garter.
Yeah.
And before then, we're not even sure how important patron saints for countries were. It is
Mm.
possible that Saint Edmund, Edmund the Martyr, king of East Anglia, 9th century, was said to have been a contender to be patron. One story claimed that Saint Edmund's influence began to fade during the Third Crusade. And so this is the part that I link to your fictitious story here. So this is a myth, okay? But
Uh-huh.
during the Third Crusade, it is said that King Richard I visited the tomb of St. George at Lydda on the eve of battle, and he prayed and he won, right?
I
Following this
see.
triumph,
Okay.
it's claimed that Richard adopted St. George as his personal patron saint and protector of his army. But
Right.
that might all just be embellished story made up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Edward I's soldiers carried his banner, and military veneration was peak in the 14th century. The French was funny because after the Battle of Agincourt, St. George's feast day was elevated to the
Uh-huh.
highest order and was made a public holiday. Guilds
Right.
then were dedicated to him. He had military parades and processions. And he was obviously he became associated with knights. Gregory the
Hmm.
Great and Edward the Confessor were also thought of as patron saints, but because of George's military and guild association, I think George won out, which to answer your
Mm.
question before then, why George? And I think that this is the reason.
Yeah.
He was not the only military saint, as we said before. Theodore, Demetrius, Mercurius were also martial saints.
Hmm.
George just became very popular. Crusaders to the Holy Land in 1099 adopted the tradition of military saints, but the story of them bringing him back or evoking him during at least the First Crusade is made up afterward. It's probably a
Okay.
falsehood because we know as we said, his cult was already in Scotland at the time,
Mm.
and he is popular elsewhere. So
Mm.
the famous history of the Seven Champions of Christendom by Richard Johnson, which names St. George of England, St. Denis of France, St. James of Spain, St. Anthony of Italy, St. Andrew of Scotland, St. Patrick of Ireland, and St. David of Wales. Link George to the tradition of King Arthur, which is again probably why he became so popular in England, and tries to make him from England, which might be why people think he's English today.
Yeah.
One tradition claims he was born in Coventry, very specific place, and that he goes off to Egypt, kills a dragon, marries a princess, has 3 children, and then dies fighting a second dragon on his way home.
To be fair, if you're from Coventry, you would go off to Egypt. So
I knew
you,
it.
you just would. So you got. I
That's so
want to
good.
go somewhere where there's less dysentery. Come on, let's go.
Exactly. So actually, so furthermore, England is not the first or even the biggest place where St. George is venerated. St. George is the
Mhm.
patron saint of Georgia, the
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
Not named after Georgia, actually, because we call Georgia Georgia, but they don't call themselves Georgians. They call themselves Cartvelli. And it is claimed that he is the most venerated saint in the nation. An 18th century Georgian geographer and historian, Vachushti Bargatoni, sorry if I butchered that name to all Cartvelians, wrote that there are 365 Orthodox churches dedicated to George, one for each day of the year.
Nice.
Yeah, and so as well, they have the largest monastery dedicated to George. Devotions to Saint George in Georgia date back to the 4th century, so very, very old.
Mm.
While, and as we said, while not technically named after the saint, the country's name in English is early and well attested as a back derivation for St. George. He's also the major saint of Ethiopia, where Christianity is said to have its longest unbroken line, and where St. George is the patron saint of their Orthodox Church. In Ethiopia, he is presented as a black saint and seen as a local. Their stories say that he is from Ethiopia.
Mm.
He even has his own brewery there, which is wonderful, St. George's Brewery, and is said to still be performing miracles even to this day. He is invoked quite a lot, and they claim that he still does miracles. He has his own style of cross. And the Church of St. George at Lalibela, again, sorry for my Ethiopian, is one of the oldest rock-hewn
Yeah.
churches ever in the world.
Mm.
He's also the major saint of Malta, Gozo specifically, Portugal, and by extension Brazil, Genoa, Barcelona, and his colors grace all of these flags. So that's that.
Interesting. Yeah. And it one of the things I find most interesting about that sort of range of people who can take on a character like George, and indeed other saints, as have been, is the way that it really speaks to how people in the medieval world, in the late classical world, saw a continuation of communication and association well into what we often think of as being a very sort of isolated European, isolated Middle East, isolated North Africa, um, and also isolated, in particular, sub-Saharan Africa. There are lots of people who like to make a very distinct difference between those two for reasons which aren't terribly wholesome. So it's nice to be able to point to that, and especially George's church turning up in Lalibela, I think, turning up there. Um, it also actually points to, because the same monarch also oversaw, basically he was trying to create a miniature Jerusalem, wasn't he, in Ethiopia? Uh, and it's fascinating how uh, people sort of rush to almost deliberately forget that and associate these people with modern nations as opposed to
Yeah, people forget that.
international connections.
People forget that for also slightly unwholesome reason. Most of North
Mm.
Africa was Christian before the Islamic Revolution.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
they have saints, they have their own version of the Bible, they are Christian, they have
yeah.
their own Coptic traditions, etc.
Mm,
Like I said, Ethiopian Orthodox Church has their own traditions as well.
mm,
So this whole idea of George being a singular character when
mm,
he's very obviously universal, and like I said,
yeah,
venerated more in other nations than he is in England,
mm,
it is slightly unfair to think
yeah,
that he himself belongs to one place when really he like I said, he was already even during the First Crusade, he was already popular on
mm,
3 other continents that had nothing to do with England. So
no. And actually, I mean, obviously, you'll know this, but for people at home, there's a map of the world according to Christendom's understanding at the time, where it shows Jerusalem in the middle and then essentially 3 petals
the
coming
Mappa
out,
Mundi, yeah.
yeah, like a
Mhm.
flower. And Africa was a key part, was one of those petals. So it was,
That's right.
yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, how certainly, um, again, modern people in YouTube comments often do not want to talk about that sort of
You want to
stuff.
make them really mad? Just tell them that Africa has the most ethnodiversity of any continent.
Yeah, yeah,
That is
yeah.
true, but a lot of people don't
Oh,
like to know that.
also, what's also quite interesting is that because obviously the definition of whiteness, for example, was created at some point by people. But actually, it's interesting how that expands when it becomes economically more advantageous at times. But also, there's more variation within what people call Caucasian in terms of the look of people
Hmm.
than there is almost within any other descriptor that people try to put onto people. That is to say, we're all on a spectrum, and it's a glorious spectrum.
I'm
And
on
some of us,
several.
yeah. I think you're going to say registered. Yeah, I'm on, I'm on several.
I'm on
Um,
several.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, and it's a good thing. But in that sense, I guess George is for everyone. George is, in
There is
accessible
there is
sense.
a wonderful book which I'm going to mention later on, by Dr. Samantha, who is I guess the preeminent scholar on George, and her new book is Saint George, a Saint for All, and she
Right.
talks about a lot of his history, what he means to people, and we'll get on about some of his even weirder legends a little bit later on. So here, Mark, here's a super easy one for you now.
Okay.
Was Saint George a Roman soldier?
Based on the answers to the previous questions, I'm going to say we don't know.
Ah, yes, we don't know, but the answer is probably not. In the original
Oh,
text,
okay.
he was just a holy man. It's theorized that due to his possibly being alive under the reign of Diocletian, that he might have been a legionary. But the legend of him being a Roman soldier who refused to renounce his Christian faith was made up in the fourth century, so a little bit after he died. And that's it. One of the soldier legends states that he was a Roman soldier who died and was brought back to life 3 times. Again, very Christ-like. And became one of the great martyr saints of the Byzantine Empire, echoing that theme of resurrection. In the 5th century, soldiers started to call on him for aid.
Hmm.
And in the First Crusade, at the siege of Antioch in 1098, he is said to have appeared at the battle alongside other saints like Saint Andrew.
Were
Did
they wearing name tags?
did they have their flags on their
Yeah,
band?
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. How would you know it was him?
yeah.
Uh, some legends also put him at the Battle of Hastings. Again, very silly.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
13th century is when he becomes, like we said, popular in the English army, and they start using the call in the name of the Almighty and Saint George at the
Mm,
Battle of Agincourt. So hence your French takeover
mm,
there.
mm.
In the English mumming tradition as well, Saint George is seen as a soldier fighting the Black Prince of Paradine, who kills him, and then George is resurrected.
Yeah,
This
interesting. Although I'm not sure I would thank anyone for bringing me back to life 3 times, only to be killed
Just
again.
let me die, God.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. What are you doing? Yeah.
Just sitting there, you just resurrect with like all the holes, and you're going, oh God, oh
Oh,
God, oh
oh.
God.
I know I'm meant to be holy, but
Oh, so and you get up and like things just go start going,
yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
he lives, he lives. So speaking of which, how did St. George die?
Oh, is it some form of crucifixion? You mentioned he has his own cross.
In Ethiopia, he has his own cross, yeah. So
Oh, okay,
the
okay,
correct answer is we just don't know. We have no
okay,
idea.
okay. We
There
don't
are
know.
many
Okay.
different stories as to how he was martyred. According to one source, St. George was torn on the rack, hit on the head with hammers until his brain came out of his ears, forced to drink poison, torn on a wheel, boiled in lead, and much else besides, all over a period of 7 years. One 5th century decree
Wow.
attributed to Pope Gelasius declared that, lest it give rise to mockery, all the details of his death were not to be read aloud in church. As well, even in his later stories with the dragon, whatever it is,
Hmm.
he always dies a bad death, and he is always a martyr, no matter what happens. But how he died, we actually don't know. And why
Right.
they make his death so horrific in stories, I cannot
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah. Although it reminds me of in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight, where the Batman and Joker are having a conversation, and it starts out with him slamming Joker's head against the table. It's like, never start with the head. In that sense, why would you bash his brains out only to then poison him?
Yeah,
And then,
yeah, exactly. You're supposed to be
yeah,
torturing him. Like
yeah,
you need him to do a confession.
you-
Don't hurt his
yeah,
head. You need him
no,
alive. Head and
yeah,
heart, never touch him.
no.
Never touch him.
Hence the reason that you're notorious. Yeah, yeah.
So
Got
another
these
easy
tips.
speaking of the Dark Knight, was Saint George a night mark?
No,
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 absolutely not.
yeah,
No,
no.
he was only made into a knight much later. Originally, his early heroic stories, he didn't even have a horse. Around 1100,
Oh,
he
poor
got
guy.
yeah. Who sends him into a battle without a horse?
Yeah.
Around 1100, he got a horse of depictions where he is stabbing the dragon, or rather a serpent-like creature with a spear,
Right. Yeah.
often through the mouth. That's very
Mm,
classic. But this image might have been lifted from Saint Theodore, whom we mentioned before,
mm,
whom he is sometimes depicted together with. Over time, St. George became the embodiment of the ideal chivalrous Christian knight,
mm,
because really, let's face it, knights were not good guys most of the time. And so
no.
they needed
Mm,
to make this kind of image, this branding. And so they made him the image of the chivalrous knight. He went on to
mm,
be associated with St. Mary, being called Our Lady's Knight. Our good buddy, Professor Ronald Hutton, says, as befitted that of a Christian warrior, St. George's cult burgeoned in Western Europe and in the wake of the Crusades, which is why he's probably associated with knights. During
yeah.
the next 2 centuries, he was carefully promoted by the conqueror of King Edward III and Henry V to rival the French Saint Denis, and to replace the non-martial, or less martial, Edward the Confessor as England's patron saint. The epic poem "The Faerie Queen" in 1590 has the Red Cross knight wearing the standard of St. George. And so ever
Right.
since then, he has been associated with knights. And as well, like we said, with the Order of the Garter. In
Mm.
fact, in Coptic tradition, he's not a knight at all. He's the bridegroom of Christ. And
Oh.
he ends up getting married to Jesus, which is,
Oh.
oh, isn't that sweet? Bridegroom of Christ. So there is an element of like same-sex marriage like going on there,
Mm,
which I think is
mm,
very interesting, where his gender didn't matter, just like, oh,
mm.
you're getting married to Jesus, like be happy. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
some have worried, obviously, about St. George's image with regard to, like you said, with the soccer game, football game. I apologize. Edward Gibbon, who wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, mixed up St. George with George of Cappadocia, who are not the same people. And
Right.
George of Cappadocia was a very bad man who did bad things. And so St. George is often associated with sometimes with brutality, xenophobia, but George is a saint for all,
Right.
and
Interesting.
and and is only really associated with knighthood in England. That's about it.
Mm, mm. Okay.
Here's a slightly more difficult one for you, Mark. Oh, did you have a
Uh,
question?
well,
Question?
yeah, I was just going to ask, do we have any sense of where this need for a sort of a connection between a code and chivalrous behavior and and the need to sort of almost reconcile the violence of being a warrior in service of someone comes from? Because there's lots of Renaissance art where people are sort of praying at their swords, and the sword almost
Hmm.
becomes a cross, and this kind of thing. And of course, we can compare it very loosely to things like being a samurai and the history of being a servant in that sense of someone, and almost constructing an elaborate sense of, well, uh, whatever violence I commit is done in the right way, and therefore it's okay. Do we
That's
have any?
age old. That's age
Yeah,
old. It's been ever since antiquity. It's, oh, my God says I should do this. Therefore,
yeah,
I am. But if you're talking specifically about chivalrous code, I mean that really happened during like the romances, right?
mm,
Where
mm,
suddenly knights in the early times, in early Middle Ages, were really not great. If you
no,
think about the Crusades and a lot and things that they've done,
mm,
uh, or in the name really of their kings rather than the name of God,
yeah,
or in the
yeah.
name of the
Oh,
Pope and Rome,
geopolitics. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Exactly.
Mm,
So there really was sort of like a rebranding in, I would say, Merry England times. So around 1250 onward,
yeah.
there is the rebranding of knighthood. There's a rebranding of Christianity as a sort of merry religion as well, hence the term Merry England,
Mm,
where things were, and again, we're going to talk about that a little bit when we talk about Robin Hood later. Um, so that there was that sort of little bit of a rebranding, because they realized that, now that they had brought the freedom to everybody else, so they had brought the Christianity to
yes,
everybody else,
yeah,
it kind of, there were certain aspects that weren't working, right? There were already
yeah,
splits happening, and people not, so many synods, oh my God, so many synods of
yeah.
people not agreeing with each other, can't even agree on the date of Easter, for criminy's sake. So I think it really was that the romances, especially the chivalric aspect that was very popular in France, which then obviously got translated into England. And a lot of there was that more romantic code, and so people have this romance of, oh, knights going off to defend. There was a lot of symbolism happening, right? So the knight always represented, the knight represented goodness and honor. The dragon represented the devil and sexuality, and the woman, who was not always a woman, but the woman always represented chastity, and certainly not weakness, but definitely chastity. So there was that whole trinity of rebranding that people have a very romantic notion of, but that didn't happen till like I said, mid 1200s, late 1300s. So.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Mark, what date is St. George's Day? I have my finger on the button.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I'm going to say it, the 23rd of April.
Well, give yourself half a point, because it's 23rd of
Okay.
April in England.
Right.
But it does depend. In England, it's April 23rd. Sometimes the date changes depending on when it falls out. In Canada, specifically in Newfoundland, Labrador, where it is a holiday this year, it was on April 22nd, because it's whatever the closest Monday to the 23rd is.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
In order to give people the 3-day weekend. And the Georgian Orthodox Church commemorates St. George's Day twice a year, once on May 6th, and second on November 23rd. This feast day is unique to Georgia because it's a double feast day, and it is the day of St. George's martyrdom. That's when they celebrate it. April 24th is the commemoration in Poland. May 7th is in modern day Lydda, and January 27th in the Greek Orthodox Church. As well in Belgium, in Mons, which is, for whatever reason, they also have taken up St. George as their patron. He is venerated on Trinity Sunday. There is a whole reenactment of George killing the dragon in Ducas de Mons, or Mon, however you'd like to pronounce it, which began in the Middle Ages. In the Slavic Orthodox tradition, it's May 6th and is considered the major spring holiday, which is much in line with May Day, and is also associated with flowers and making bonfires. An easier question for you, Mark. Easier one. Did St. George ever fight a dragon?
No.
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 Only in our hearts.
I mean, no, exactly. Yeah.
Only in myth, I'm afraid.
And even then, it was probably some of the worm, Yeah.
Actually, it started off as a serpent. Yeah. The story of the dragon is much later construction, and like we said, was possibly lifted from Saint Theodore's story. The first time he's mentioned with a dragon is 8th century, which is much long after he died. But the dragon in this instance was a stand-in for the emperor. Saints fighting dragons became a very popular motif. And the saint representing goodness, the dragon being the devil, evil rulers, or base sexuality, depending on the depiction. And the women who needed saving, representing chastity. Saint Michael, as we said, also has stories of dragon slaying, as does Saint Theodore, and several other saints around this time. Depictions of George with the dragon begin 9th century. Visual depictions, not stories. Visual depictions of begin 9th century. The dragon originally, like we said, in these depictions, originally probably symbolizing Diocletian. The story of the dragon that we know of, the popular one, came from 13th century Jacobus de Voragine in his famous Golden Legend in 1260. The narrative episode of St. George and the Dragon took place somewhere called Selene, possibly in Libya. St. George is in this story. St. George is a knight, and he becomes aware of a princess who has been given as a sacrifice to a fire-breathing dragon. He stabs the dragon through the mouth and saves the princess on the condition that her people will convert to Christianity. So did he do it for good? The dragon originally had no fire in his mouth. He saved women he saved other women from the dragon, and eventually those women became associated with Saint Mary, who was the most popular saint in medieval Europe. In England, there are 5 different locations for his dragon slaying. Do you want to guess where they are? One is in Wales. One location is in Wales, and even in Libya, he is said to have slain the dragon there. So they keep making him a local saint, and they keep having him slay the dragon, and then they keep naming places after him and the dragon. And he's also slayed the dragon in Lebanon, and Germany, and Malta, and Belgium. Yeah.
Can I go for is it somewhere in Monmouth?
Ooh, maybe.
I'm not sure. I can't get more specific than that. Although, would Glastonbury be one of them?
That's a very interesting point, because that is where obviously Arthur is famed to be not buried, because we know he's not there in his grave. But it is possible. A lot of people have different stories of George slaying dragons on hills.
Okay.
Next question.
Yeah.
When was St. George's flag established?
The 13th century.
Oh, 10 on 10 mark. Very good. Yes. There was a great fashion. I mean, in general, there was a great fashion for giving saints their own flags. That really took hold in the 15th century, but his flag was established in England in the 13th century.
Okay. You have a flag? Yeah,
exactly.
we have a flag. You want bongos? Get me tea. Yeah. Sorry, I'm quoting someone. I'm not actually that horrible.
No, it's great. I love it so much. The widespread attribution to George and the Red Cross on the white field in Western arts. St. George's Cross is sometimes attributed to the flag of Genoa, which had adopted this image for their flag, and George as their patron saint in the 12th century. And as is recorded in the Genovese annals in 1198, referring to the flag, or a red flag with the depiction of George and the dragon. So they had a different flag. The illumination of this flag is shown in the annals of the year 2027. The Genovese flag with the red cross was used alongside this George's flag, the one with him and the dragon, from at least 1218, and is known as the Insignia Cruxa Communis Janue. Sorry for my classical Latin. The flag, or after medieval Latin, I should say. The flag showing the saint himself was the city's principal war flag, but the flag showing the cross was used alongside it in the 1240s. In the reign of Henry VIII is when the flag was established for England. Victorians claimed that Richard the Lionheart himself adopted both the flag and the patron saint from Genoa, but we don't know that for sure. No, there's no historical evidence for that. No. When was the first St. George's Day celebrated in England?
Well, actually, would it be 1533 or something like that?
Why do you say that date? Why do you pick that one?
I'm just thinking in and around Reformation and the need to establish a brand new identity away from the Catholic Church.
Very interesting, but
no,
I'm afraid not. I'm afraid no. So he's celebrated in England from 9th century onward, as we said, with his early cult in Scotland, but the holiday was not officially established in England until 1222.
Okay.
Yes, but as
I was nowhere near.
But it is interesting. So there is a bit here. So for example, Professor Hutton writes that by 1530, close, the feast had the beginnings of a truly national celebration. And so even though he was venerated and celebrated everywhere else in England, by 1530, he was not yet universal. No festivities were recorded in London or in other towns, but instead in certain other parts of England. Early Tudor records survive, and that his cult, or that his celebration, was spreading rapidly, and represented an excellent fusion of patriotism, religion, and entertainment. Again, during the end of the Merry England era, and then the Reformation took everything away. The holiday almost completely died out, but in the late 19th century, a drift back to the celebration of St. George's Day began, propelled by a more self-conscious, unfortunate nationalism, and a resurgence in chivalric imagery, probably fueled by the world wars as well, and a waning of Anglican allergy to saints.
Mm.
It was wholly spontaneous and localized, being manifested in towns and villages scattered across specifically southern England.
Interesting. Okay. Hmm. Hmm.
Ready for the tough question?
Yeah, come
How is St. George linked to May Day?
on. I mean, obviously, I don't know, but I can give you a theory.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay. This is inspired by Red Dwarf. I don't know if you've seen this episode or not.
Okay.
But we have the question raised: why do people say Mayday when they're crashing
Hmm.
and in an aeroplane? And out comes um, out comes the reply. It's because it's French. It's Mayday. Help me. You know. So maybe George responds to a call for help in some way.
Again, like you're just skimming the surface of
Oh,
skimming it. Uh,
crikey.
so you make up these things, but yet you don't realize. So
Wow.
obviously in England he's celebrated before May Day, but in Central and Eastern European traditions, Saint George is ultimately linked to their May Day traditions,
Uh-huh.
including farming traditions, water traditions, and greenery traditions. A green George is put into the river or stream to bless the water and promote fertility. In the Golden Legend, like we just said, the Italian writing, George's
Yeah.
name is linked to the land. And in the Sufi tradition, Al-Qadir, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, it might be Al-Qadir, whose name means the green one, is the one who brings the rains, healing people and blessing of livestock. In the Golden Legend as well, George is depicted as a farmer. In Slavic areas, George is the protector of livestock.
Hmm.
Among the Romani peoples as well, he is the personification of springtime.
Okay. Okay.
Sound familiar, Mark?
It does sound familiar.
Does it sound familiar?
It sounds like the Green Man. No? No?
Green Man traditions of England, however, are not linked to St. George and come much later. But in Bavaria, Green George is also known as Father May.
Right. Okay.
In the
Interesting.
Balkans, the holiday celebrates the return of springtime and is considered to be one of the most important ones. Celebrations are closely associated with rituals and festivals associated with the awakening of nature, the arrival of spring, dominant in the Balkans, but also present in other parts in Central Europe. These rituals primarily consist of taking the sheep out to graze, ritual slaughtering of lamb, preparation of various lamb dishes, ritual
Hmm.
bathing, uh, in the rivers and springs, the setting of live fires, decorating with greenery, flowers, and conducting of love spells.
Oh, love spells. Interesting. Uh, so you say putting a Green George into the river. Would this be literally like almost like a guy figure, like a
Yep. So
figurine?
they making a rush figure and putting him into the rivers
Interesting.
to soak. Yeah,
Okay, that's cool.
which
That's
we
cool.
will elaborate on a little later. But for now, as the St. George portion is done,
Yeah.
you now get the joy of further reading.
Yay!
Yay! So further reading, St. George, a Saint for All by Dr. Samantha Riches. I highly recommend this book. I mean, her work in general is really amazing. And she goes into St. George as a universal saint and really talking about how he is more popular everywhere else, excepting where
Hmm.
he's really just like a nationalist figure now. Pagan Britain by, of course, our buddy Professor Ronald Hutton. English Heritage also has a wonderful 9 things you didn't know about St. George, which is a nice little bullet point thing if you don't like reading. As well, a history extra from the BBC has St. George's Day, 10 things you probably did not know about him. Also, very worth your time. A very short read, but very worth your time and very nicely written.
Okay. Uh, is it probably just worthwhile just briefly touching on the fact one of the reasons why he's become and flying the flag has become such an issue, the English flag, uh, is because in the 70s and 80s he was very much claimed. The imagery was claimed by people like the National Front,
Take
BNP.
it back, Mark.
If,
Take it back.
no, it's not for me to do. I have a lovely Welsh flag just folded up there in my bookcase. uh, but it's interesting because so just across the way, well, a block that way, there was a house on George's Day that was flying, well, that was draping a flag out of the window, and we were driving into town to see to go to the shops, and we both me and the wonderful Mrs. Soup, we both sort of slightly cringed. You get that you get that instinctual kind of ugh, what are they trying to say about that?
So you know what you
Almost
do?
thing.
You call their bluff. You dress up as a knight, and you go to the door. You go, aha! I am here to slay the dragon in the name of Saint George.
Well,
And if they close the door and call you a nutter, you go, you're not real fans.
no, exactly, yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, the book is better than the movie.
In this
Um,
case.
but what and this is something I found quite useful. What she said was, but what we probably should be doing, and increasingly, I know other people, I know lovely people, lovely, very proud Englishmen, and actually very proud Yorkshiremen, actually first.
Yeah, Doncaster is a big center of his, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, who really want to be able to enjoy St. George's Day in the same way that people have access to St. Patrick's Day, and people have access to, to a lesser extent, I suppose, St. David's Day in Wales, and that is to say, internationally known, and so not associating, not immediately going, ugh, when you see someone flying an oversized George's cross, it's probably a good thing, and until you talk to them and they say something horrible. Um, but
But
it's
we talked a bit about this when we were doing St. Patrick's Day, whereas there are a lot of young Irish people who
yeah,
don't want to be associated with St. Patrick's Day because they feel either that, oh, it's representing the Catholic Church, and the Catholic
mm,
Church has never been kind to certain people, etc.
mm,
But really, and so this is how I look at it, as somebody who loves to learn about these kinds of things and learn about
mm,
the real history of these kinds of things, as we did with St. Patrick. It's really just a day on which that you are proud to be in a country where you can just enjoy your culture. That
yeah,
is how I feel about it. We know, especially for St. Patrick, that a lot of St. Patrick's Day customs were made up in the States,
hmm,
but now they're coming back, and now Ireland is making up their own traditions. Because remember, kids, it doesn't matter whether something is pagan or Christian, it's all made up anyway, and you can celebrate however you want. And so
mm,
I think it's so too. I think it's the same thing with St. George's Day
mm,
and his flag. It's up to you and what
mm,
you feel about it and how you feel about it. It can be a day like here on in Canada, we still celebrate, Victoria Day.
mm, right,
Why? No, nobody, nobody goes, oh no, it's the great Queen Victoria, how wonderful she was. But
yeah.
there are some that nobody here is so proud of being part of the Commonwealth. It's
So
just the
you don't bake a sponge, a nice Victoria sponge, and
but that is what we do. So we do
oh,
have
okay,
we do have a cream tea out at our
right,
library on the lawn. We put on the hats. We have a lovely time, but we don't, there's no British nationalism in it. There's no,
no,
it's a day on which we actually celebrate like just liking Victorian British things. That's kind of it. And we have a day off in May. We don't actually, there's no political charged aspect of it for us. We don't really
no,
care.
no,
And so I think you can enjoy St. George's Day just as you celebrate St. David's Day. And there
mm,
doesn't have to be a religious or a political charge behind it. You can just enjoy celebrating your culture. Have yourself, I don't know, whatever you want to do for St. George's Day. Have yourself some beans, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Well, this this is both serious and not serious. Apparently, one of the festival activities this year was to punch a horse. Did you not hear about that?
No.
Unfortunately, yeah, some people got again, this is the
Like,
ugly side of it.
but why?
They
That has nothing to do with the myths
yeah,
or
no, no, it doesn't.
I'm
No,
so confused.
they were people turned up in London. They were sort of talking about wanting their country back, and they so one person hit a horse with an umbrella. Um, Alcohol was probably involved.
That
Uh,
person is not English. They're
no,
just a dummy. And they can
yeah,
celebrate dummy things with their dummy
yeah,
people. And that's that.
yes, yes, in Dummyville, yeah. Off you go, yeah,
So,
and yeah, go on.
did you want to? So let's move on to May Day. So,
Okay,
Mark, since May Day is coming at this current point, May Day is coming in 3 days' time. But
it's coming,
what it's is May
it's coming.
Day actually celebrating? It's not.
Uh, it's celebrating an ancient uh, Celtic New Year fertility festival. Yeah, there you go.
I love how you just put all the talking points and like
Yeah,
just smash it all in. I love this new element of you not guessing. It's just you making up stuff. And like you always like slide the surface, just skim across the
yeah,
surface,
yeah.
going, maybe, and then now I realize you're kidding.
No,
So
it's like I bounce off the atmosphere of the question. Yeah,
so there are a
or the
lot
answer.
there are a lot of answers to this question, actually. Obviously, it's halfway between the solstice and the equinox. Um, is it a seasonal holiday? Is it a farming holiday? Depending on where you live and whether you're in a city or you're in the rural culture, the answer is completely different as to what it's celebrating. In the UK, celebrating May Day is called Maying, May singing, garlanding, and the people who partake are usually or were called mayors.
Hmm.
At least in Northern Europe, May Day is the first big festival after the planting season. And there's a practical reason for celebrating it. During the Middle Ages, the legal or administrative year ended the last day of April. As a result, it was treated as a community-wide holiday, celebrating with bonfires, wreath making, as well as traditional dances, songs relating to the season. As Professor Ronald Hutton writes in his Pagan Britain, livestock would be driven out to mow the fields, since the grass would have already gone, and
Hmm.
the animals would be taken out for the whole summer. And some of the community would go into the mountains. Bonfires would be done to increase the potency of holy flames in Britain, as often they were kindled by the most primitive of means, by friction of wood. So this was an ancient tradition for them,
Yeah.
but specifically rural farming tradition. They made need fires, and they also did this to ward off witchcraft, I guess, or like bad luck, really, not necessarily ward off witches, because that's a thing that's much later. In The Rise and Fall of Merry England, Ronald Hutton states there is an abundant literary evidence that the common custom on May Day was to go to the nearest countryside and return with flowers as well. They made May ales, they played May games, there were May plays. All were celebrations of the season communal life, and all the funds were contributed to parish churches.
Okay.
These revelries were as well the revelries culminated in crowning mock kings and mock queens, the latter of which was originally the rarer custom. In Ireland, it's also a Gale Day, meaning traditionally on the 1st of May and the 1st of November, tenant farmers paid half their year's rents to the landlords. People
Okay.
who took stock of their food supply as well had to sustain them until the crops could be harvested until later in the year. In the States and in other places, May Day is famously the International Workers' Holiday. So not Labor Day, which is in September. That's a different thing. This is International Workers' Day.
Okay.
So having said that, is May Day the first day of spring?
Are we talking metrologically? Are we talking traditionally in terms of calendrical calculation?
I don't know. I don't know.
uh, y- no.
Very good, Mark. No.
Yay!
In Ireland and Scotland and Wales, and obviously for Beltane and Gallen, which we'll talk about in a second, it's the first day of summer. It was
Oh,
also the first day of summer for many Eastern European traditions as well. In
okay.
Germanic countries, however, it might have been associated with springtime. But
Okay.
again, we'll talk about that later. Beltane or Beltane, how you want to say it, Beltane embraces the summer, bidding farewell to the dark half of the year. Flowers, dancing, and bonfires feature strongly in festivities. People also sought to protect themselves, their homes, their livestock against supernatural forces or just bad luck, essentially, against so they always had they made pishoga, which are little I guess charms or superstitions. People
Okay.
worked in the fields, focusing on the care of animals and their movement to different pastures. There's also an emphasis on fishing, especially for salmon in Ireland. This doesn't seem to be tied to any myth, though. It was a busy time for markets in order to sell animals. And at this time, seasonal laborers were hired The important job of cutting turf as well in the bogs also started in earnest around this time because it was summer, meaning now is the harvest time of the year. So
Okay,
yes, so summer mostly. Yes,
interesting.
exactly.
So
That
why?
whole
So why? Oh, do we about to say? Go on.
that whole concept of
Yeah,
like springtime, of like, oh, springtime starts on the, was it March 23rd or April 23rd or whatever it is,
yeah,
that's American gobbledygook and has no
right.
meteorological construction whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay,
Was that
interesting.
what you were going to ask?
It was what I was going to ask, but
Yeah.
also as well, it in that sense, do you think then that that's due to latitude, isn't it? Surely.
Yes, obviously,
Yeah.
it's due to
Yeah.
different weather patterns, different
Yeah.
latitude, etc. As well, I mean, it's kind of silly because the spring in northern states, much like Canada, I mean, it snowed last week, so
Mm-hmm.
very obviously, and very obviously, we would never say here that, May 1st is the first day of spring or summer.
No.
Our summer really starts like at the end of June,
Right.
and then it kicks up for a good 3 months, and then it's winter by the end of October. So,
It's
so
winter for the rest of your life. Yeah.
we kind of do follow. I mean, obviously, unfortunately, because of climate change, things are changing now. We
Yeah.
barely had a winter this year, but
Yeah.
we kind of follow the old Celtic system
Yeah.
of 6 months, 6 months winter, 6 months summer.
Yeah.
Kind of, we
Mm.
really do, because
Hmm.
that's kind of how our weather works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, but also, I don't know about you, but it often feels as though you're just getting into the groove and then
fall,
it's
summer,
changing.
fall, spring,
Yeah.
as we say in Canada, no matter what jacket you take with you in the morning, the
Yeah.
answer is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because
But then
either
if you go prepared, the answer will also be wrong. Let's just say if you go, well, I'm going to take two, it's going to be wrong somehow. Yeah.
yeah, that's why here we do layers. So this way you could just keep peeling it off or keep
Yeah.
putting it back on. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's often freezing in the morning, then you're absolutely boiling by noon, and
Mm.
then again it's at 6 o'clock. It's back to 5 degrees. So you just go,
Yeah.
why? Well,
Yeah.
the one of the great jokes of weather in Canada is a distinct place in that you can have all four seasons in the same day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Speaking of seasons, Mark, what is the oldest May Day custom that we know of?
Is it going to be? I'm not going to say the obvious one.
Which is
I'm going to go with is it some sort of baked good?
no. But
Oh,
what baked good did you think of?
I don't know. I was
I mean,
I
listen,
was
I'm all in for a pie, especially an archaeological one. But
well. Okay, the logic is that there is a certain thing that people apparently have done for a long time on May
mhm.
Day, and it's associated with a certain type of performer as well, and that performer has its roots uh in well, yeah, North African Moroccan culture,
Oh, I
and in
see. But what does it have to do with pies?
well, in turn, I was wondering if there was some sort of delicacy that would have spices in that might be associated with it.
No, but now
But I don't
I'm
think there is.
intrigued.
I
Now
don't think
I'm
there is.
intrigued. I want
No.
to know this.
Yeah.
No,
Uh,
it's not.
okay.
But
Okay. I'll just say it. Maypole and Morris dancing.
incorrect. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
No.
Garland making and making fires were the oldest, as well, paying rents and taxes.
Oh, you'd already said you already said the fires. Ah, honestly. Okay, I'm paying taxes. Fair enough.
So in Ireland, the May bush, the May bow are the two, and obviously sacred fires are the two oldest customs. In England, it's similar, but to answer your question, maypoles were an import from Germany,
Yeah.
and didn't show up till much later.
Yeah.
Mayflowers and garlanding seems to be unanimous, though, across Europe. Washing oneself in the river or in the stream in Central and Eastern Europe, collecting the May dew and washing your face and feet in Ireland, again, it seems to be a thing. The tradition of spreading flowers at threshold as well is very common in certain areas, and was probably very old,
Okay.
especially in the south of Ulster, where they spread it over the threshold. Throughout Ireland, there's a strong tradition of showing welcome. by spreading rushes. I don't know if many of these customs are done anymore. In
Hmm.
Central Europe, many of these things are attributed to St. George's Day, as we said, which happens on May 6th instead for them. So they don't celebrate May Day. Their quote unquote May Day is on May 6th, and their customs are just as old.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a May Day.
Yeah, it is. It is a May Day. Yeah,
It's a May Day.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
we'll get on later to whether or not May Day means the whole month or not. Um, and there's also a Feast of Lamb in certain cultures. Idir Inja Beltane. Sorry for my Irish. I haven't spoken it in a long time. Meaning the two fires of Beltane. So driving the cattle through the embers of the fires, very, very old. We know that's mentioned in connection with Druids blessing flocks and things like that.
Hmm.
May Day is also especially associated with butter stealing, the stealing of butter, profit from the home. Cows were also safeguarded, again, possibly against fairies, but we're not sure about that. But just protection from evil eyes and bad omens, essentially.
Oh, I
Um,
see. Right. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Also, some of the oldest customs are divination is very, very old. There's a record of like women like trying with snails on flour to foretell the man that they would marry. And there's it's so funny. Yeah,
Oh no. Oh,
yeah, I know. It's very silly.
but those poor snails. They just get covered in it, wouldn't they? And oh dear.
And
Okay.
then they get cooked, I think.
Uh,
But when as well washing furze or gorse bush. So when the gorse is out of blossom, kissing's out of fashion. Furze is also known as gorse, obviously, and it flowers from February to May. Uh, this is also they also studied weather patterns. So much like in February with Candlemas, there's also a lot of weather lore associated with Candlemas. The hawthorn, being the May bush, is also extremely old
okay.
because it was simply once known as just May or the May tree. And it is still associated with this time of the year in all of the British Isles, not just Ireland. When we read of medieval knights and ladies riding around a Maying on the first morning of May, this refers to the flowering hawthorn boughs that they gathered to decorate their halls. Uh, for the first day, according to the old style calendar, this was until they did this until the 18th century. Woods and hedges were alight with its white glistening blossoms. And in England, as you said, there is Morris dancing, but that
Mm,
does not go back. That
no.
does not go back that far. Or it
No.
is old, but it's not ancient. No.
No.
Speaking of old and ancient, Mark, is
Okay.
May Day just appropriated version of Bealtaine?
Hey, do you know this is something I had not heard before? So I'm going to say, uh, I'm gonna, based on the scores, I'm gonna roll the dice and say, yeah.
No.
Oh, rats.
Well, I would say just not necessarily because Ireland's traditions are very different to England's
Yeah.
customs. So it's not just an appropriated version. And England's customs come from, obviously, like we said, a mix of places. Ireland and Scotland, obviously by extension, and obviously the Isle of Man as well, have all their own customs. So Bealtaine and May Day probably evolved separately,
Mm,
each over time borrowing from each other. Beltane
mm,
or Beltane is a very ancient holiday that we certainly know it's first recorded in an Irish text before the year 900 AD, talking about the Druids blessing the sacred fires on this day. Beltane is the Scottish spelling that Sir James Fraser chose, and he's the one who popularized the name Beltane.
mhm,
And that was the spelling taken on by Wiccans, so they call it Beltane, they don't say Beltane. Um, the earliest reference is probably in Sanus Cormac, the early medieval Irish glossary attributed to Munster churchman Cormac of Cashel, who lived around the year 900. Under the entry Beltane, both surviving texts have lucky fire as a thing,
okay.
which were attributed to Druids. The medieval Dinshenachas does include a tale of holy fire lit by the hero Uisnech, which blazed for 7 years. But this might possibly just be, again, doesn't really seem to have any historical basis. It might just be a pseudo history where we're not sure. Bealtaine was also called Ketsawan, meaning summer's beginning, because Samhain is summer's
Mm,
end. Ketsawan is the beginning of summer. Uh, and as we said, that's where they lit special bonfires. And some of the food and drink was also offered to the Aishi or the fairies. Doors and windows of buyers are decorated and left open, perhaps because they were worried that they would catch on fire. Again, there's a lot of fire in this, the worry of fire and like bad omens and things. In
Mm.
parts of Ireland, people would also make the Maybush, which they still do now. They decorate it with flowers, ribbons, bright shells, rushlights. Holy wells, though, later on were also visited, and there are also a lot of hawthorns near holy wells. So again, there's a little bit of uh, the mix there, the mélange.
Mm.
In the Carmina Gadelica, Alexander Carmichael claims that they also featured a sacrifice of lamb, but there's no archaeological evidence for this. So we don't know. It's again possible
Mm.
because, like we said, lamb around this time in Central Europe for St. George's Day is very popular. So who knows? It's possible. There was also people leaping through bonfires is also a very ancient holiday.
Mm-hmm.
As a festival in general, Beltane almost died out mid 20th century, and only some of the customs today have been revived. Officially, Irish the May Day holiday is now the 1st of May. It is now an actual holiday,
Mm.
whereas it kind of, like I said, it kind of got suppressed. In Limerick and Clare, many other people in the country still keep the old traditions. They say that the oldest standing long tradition is in Dublin City, but again, we don't really know. That might be tourist flash. Because Dublin, there is record that Dublin did suppress the celebration or the tradition of the Maybush, like we said. So they decorate it, and then some places set it on fire, and that
Yeah.
might be very old. Here's an easy question for you, Mark. Oh, you have a question? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, excuse me. I was wondering, do you think that that's a suppression for safety reasons or a
Yes,
suppression for religious reasons?
I think it would. I think it was probably a mix of both, but honestly, I think
Yeah.
it's probably for the Dublin houses and how close they are. I think it might have been safety
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so here's an easy question for you, Mark. I know you
Okay.
know the answer to this. What is Callan Mai?
I don't know the answer to this.
Oh wait, am I saying it wrong? Is it Gallen Mao? Am I reading the Welsh wrong?
I'm drawing a total blank. I mean, so it sounds correct. It sounds
Oh,
like it's like Galen Mai or something.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, yeah.
CALAN
Oh,
space
Calen Mai. Okay, yeah, yeah. Uh,
MAI, but
no.
with the different pronunciation for
Well, I
the
mean, it literally I mean, it's literally like a May holiday by the sounds of it, but I don't
also
know.
known as Nos Gallen Half or Have.
No, yes, no, I know that.
Okay, so
Yes.
what is Nos Gallen Have?
It, a, a, a sort of a agrarian festival of sorts. You know, it's not really celebrated actively, but it's a thing. It's an old idea. I
Final
mean,
answer? Yes. Final answer?
I don't know. Yes, final answer. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes, so it is the Welsh equivalent of May
yeah,
Day. Yes, exactly. According to the tale of oh God, Culhwch ac Olwen. Yes, 10th
yeah.
century. The undying heroes of Gwyn ap Nudd or Gwyn ap Nudd were fated to do battle, and it was on May Eve. And in the 11th century story of Pwyll, the demon that stole like
Pulse,
new.
pulse.
Sorry,
It's
sorry,
okay.
sorry.
It's okay.
I forgot about the double L. My
Yeah.
mistake. I apologize to Wales and the Welsh. Uh, I'm very sorry.
No, no, no. I just
But the tradition, so that is one story that's associated with this day. The traditions start
right.
the night before with bonfires,
Yeah.
uh, um, and is called like a spirit night, when people would gather hawthorn, which is I think it's Drenan Wen
Okay.
is
Yeah.
in Welsh, and the flowers decorate their house, so very similar.
Yeah.
Celebrating the new growth, while on May Day celebrations continue throughout like summer dancing. There's May carols as well. But as you say, it's now mostly celebrated in rural parts of Wales. Traditionally,
Yeah.
bonfires were lit, and specifically in Glamorgan until
Mm.
the 1830s, where it began dying out. 9 men would gather branches of 9 different trees, and then set them on fire.
Mm. Uh, I mean, you've probably spotted this, but one of the nice things that I've always found about aspects of Welsh uh, and other languages, that is to say that it demonstrates a relationship to languages outside the island of Britain,
Uh-huh.
or the whatever, however you want to describe it, and not having to go through via the English language, is Calen, and Kalends, this kind of thing. It's the idea of
Mm-hmm.
the first day of the month,
That's right.
which is interesting.
Thanks,
But
Romans.
yeah, well, exactly, yeah. But it's one thing I haven't tied down yet, and I suspect it in actual terms. You've got to get past the Victorian attempts to make
Oh
connections, haven't
boy.
you? Yeah.
Oh boy.
Uh, is the extent to which words like that were just came in from common ancestors in Indo-European,
Mm-hmm.
or whether they were actually brought in from maybe medieval or even possibly even classical Latin.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
There is a
so things
debate.
like pont and bont for bridge, this kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about where the name Beltane comes from.
Okay.
So since you mentioned a gorgeous segue, Mark. So since you mentioned Latin, is May Day a pagan Roman holiday?
No. Speaking of Victorians.
Possibly. Possibly, especially in Central Europe. Floralia
Okay.
was the name for the original Roman holiday. A ritual called the Florifertum, I hope I pronounced that correctly, was performed either on the 27th of April or the 3rd of May, during which a bundle of wheat ears were carried to a shrine, though it's not clear if this devotion was made to Flora, the goddess of spring, or Ceres, the goddess of cereals.
Hmm. Hmm.
Floralia concluded with competitive events and spectacles, and a sacrifice to Flora. And according to 6th century chronicles of John Malelas, there was another celebration of there was like a whole mystery of around Dionysus and Aphrodite
Hmm.
that was also celebrated in this month. As well, the holiday of Perilia, celebrated on April 21st, was the pastoral event of the god and goddess Pallas, deities of shepherds and sheep. And again, they did the same thing where they brought their sheep out and made bonfires as well. As reported by Ovid in his Fausti, the original ritual involved cleaning out the sheep pens, decorating them with green branches, garlands, and flowers. A bonfire was then lit, and the shepherds would leap through the flames, taking their sheep with them, offering cakes and milk to Pallas. And then the shepherds wet their hands; they clean them with the dew of the morning,
Interesting.
and then so.
Hmm. Yeah, there are connections. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, you were going to say something, Mark, in the middle?
Oh no, no. Well, I was just going to say it's interesting how uh throughout this series of interrogations that you've subjected me to,
The
of
derogation.
of these quizzes,
Yeah.
you've what's interesting is the way in which we highlight, or they highlight, the fact that people um sort of enshrine
Hmm.
behaviors and enshrine, I guess, what we doing at this time, what do we do, what we do, and they you fossilize the things that you do at that time of year into a holiday, and you create something around it. And uh I suppose I'm fascinated by, and again, this is probably one of those things that we can never fully know, the relationship between whether it's instructive or merely uh sort of reflective. But do people go, this is the time of year when we harvest, for example, and therefore there's a harvest festival, and you're just sort of enjoying the act of being in the midst of harvest?
I
Or
do
is it?
agree. I think it's that. I think it's
Yeah.
that, which is, obviously we were all agrarian at one point,
Mm,
and I think it is that every so often, a lot of these festivals came up around the harvest, and
mm.
so it was a way to celebrate. It was a way to eat, right? Because there
Certainly
was
lots of food, yeah, yeah.
and as well there was lots of starvation back then,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So I think it was just
Mm.
a way for people to celebrate not dying.
Yeah, well, but it's a good thing to celebrate. And so, yeah, and therefore, it's, in that sense, you're unlikely to require the festival to remind you.
Yes.
to harvest, aren't you? If you are an agrarian society, you're going to know it anyway. But then again, so the reason why I ask this is that we do know that in ecclesiastic communities, the calendar was structured in a way so as to instruct and cultivate a very constructed sense of what happened when. I mean, it got even down to the point of this is the day when this type of crop is sown, this kind of thing. But I suppose we're talking also about a different level of literacy and a desire uh, to see the patterns in things, I guess,
Hmm.
as opposed, yeah. It's a slightly rambling thought, but it's just an interesting thing how throughout
But
all these
that's
traditions are different.
archaeology and anthropology. Why
Mm,
do we do the things we do? Why do we do them?
mm, yeah,
That is what that is the real study is like
yeah,
why do we do these things? Why did somebody in Orkney 3,000 years ago paint a
mm,
little or carve a little ball with three sides?
yeah,
What was the
yeah,
point of this?
mm,
We don't know. Oh, it's ritual. Oh, we don't know
mm.
that. We have no idea.
No, no, exactly,
But
yeah.
why would it be ritual? What is the
Mm,
ritual? Why did we make this ritual? Why did we need to do this? I think it is a very interesting question. This is kind of
yeah,
what we did with this whole series is it
mm,
doesn't matter if it's pagan or Christian or
no,
whatever it is. A lot of these customs that we talk about come about because of the locality, the folk customs.
mm,
And it's just stuff that people did for a
mm,
reason that they were happy to do it, like gathering flowers to decorate your house. That has nothing to do with gods at all, or
no,
nothing to do with religion or no, it's just, oh, a thing is in bloom. It's pretty. Let's
mm.
put it on the house and make the village nice. That's about
Well,
it.
yeah, and actually, on a related note, picking the flowers could be seen as uh, as as a rit if you want to go ritual, as a ritual killing of the beauty. Actually, if you really wanted to start sort of being completely unevidenced. But it's interesting though how that stuff does just happen. I mean, I'm thinking in particular of why do people take pruned flowers
Hmm.
to grave sites, for example.
Or yeah,
And if
or
yeah, and if you
stones, putting rocks. Yeah.
yeah, no, exactly, yeah, and if you ask any individual doing it, they're not going to be able to give you an answer. Certainly not a coherent, fully reasoned
Well,
out
they'll say, oh,
response.
respect for the dead. You just go, yeah, but why do you bring the flat? Why don't you bring, I
Yeah.
don't know, like a soup, or why do you
No,
bring,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, they
Or
bring
why
anything
don't
else?
you plant the flowers?
Hmm.
Or why why is it um that this makes you, because presumably it's about how it makes you feel as much as anything else.
Hmm.
Uh how do you feel about it, and why does that have to happen? And these are again, they're quite abstract questions, but I guess as you said, that is the heart of anthropology, and
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, it does lead. It leads to sometimes really kooky notions, but in the exploring, I guess there's some weird truth to be found. Yeah. Mm.
Mark getting profound
Yeah.
on the silly quiz. Brought to you by Archaeo Soup.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Brought to you by late nights and lots of smokable things. Yeah.
Speaking of smokable things,
Yeah.
is Walpurgisnacht or Walpurgis Night
Okay.
based on an ancient Germanic pagan festival?
I'm gonna roll the dice in the opposite direction and say no.
Correct. Very good, Mark.
Yay!
There is no ancient antecedent at all. As for what Bede says about Anglo-Saxons celebrating at this time of the year specifically, he
Mhm.
notes that the month of May was a time where cattle were driven out and milked 3 times a day and taken to graze on the land. And that's it. He makes no
Mm.
mention of May Day, May Eve in Germanic customs at all. As well, today, not all Germanic nations even celebrate May Day. In Sweden, Walpurgisnacht or Walpurgis Night is just known simply as the last of April, and is celebrated with a bit of drinking. And the 1st of May is just celebrated as Workers' Day. That's it.
Okay.
For those who don't know, Saint Valpurga was an English-born nun. She was actually British, who lived in a monastery in Germany and later became the abbess there. Valperga was believed to have cured the illness of many local residents. Valperga is traditionally associated with May 1st because of a medieval account of her being canonized upon the translation of her remains from their original burial place to a church there in 870 AD. This feat commemorates the canonization of her and the movement of her relics to Erstadt, sorry if I pronounced it incorrectly, both of which occurred on May 1st. She was an Anglo-Saxon missionary to the Frankish Empire. She was born in Devon around 710 and was said to possibly be the daughter of Richard of Wessex, but we don't know that for sure. In rural regions of Germany, especially in the Harz Mountains, Walpurgisnacht celebrations are traditionally the night before May Day. And they do include bonfires and the wrapping of the maypole or the Maybaum. Young people use this opportunity to party, while the day itself is used by many families to get some fresh air. Our motto is Tanzen den Mai, which is dance into May. In the Rhineland, May 1st is also celebrating the delivery of the maypole. But May Day was not established as a public holiday until, unfortunately, the Nazis declared May 1st as National Workers' Day.
Right.
In 1933, as Labor Day, many political parties and unions host activities for work and employment. And in Finland, this is known as Vappu. Again, sorry for my Finnish. Vappu is among the country's most important holidays. Initially, Walpurgisnacht was celebrated by the Finnish upper class. And then in the late 19th century, students took up its celebration. And today, merrymaking also begins on the night before. And they make mead as well. They also make homemade low alcohol mead.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Although, as you say, this thing of certain universal human behaviors, the fact that they celebrate with drinking, and young people use it as an excuse to have a good time. Of course.
Why not?
Yeah, of course.
Why not? This whole idea of, again, like this whole idea of like, oh, it has to be a pagan festival because, oh, drinking and revelry, you just go, not really. I mean,
No.
and anybody with a day off in the middle of a working season will get crunk. That's exactly what will happen. It's a tale as old as time, fortunately. Speaking of pagan things, Mark.
Yep.
Is the May Queen a pagan figure?
No.
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 Faerie Queen is a late medieval creation in Professor Hutton's Queens of the Wild. Anglo-Saxons believed in elves because, again, like they believe that, oh, the Faerie Queen and the May Queen. But our idea of elves came from literary chivalric romances composed by the ruling elites, featuring fae who have sumptuous lifestyles and superhuman powers. They function as patrons, lovers, and predators for knights and ladies who were the protagonists of these romances, who were often Christian themselves. The French word for fae gave us the word fairy, and there's no agreed spelling on that, just letting you know, so you can spell that however you like. The position of a queen, with or without a male consort, came to us from France around 1300. By the end of the 14th century, the elf or fairy queen was fully established. Fairy originally meant enchantment, that is true, but the English call elves fairies instead. Again, so there was a little bit of a difference. Now they're kind of melded together. She became Titania in Shakespeare, and those accused of witchcraft claimed to be given abilities by the fairies. Fairies were seen as tricksters, but the queen was always seen as benevolent. The Irish tradition for May Day claims that the Aishi came to visit on May Eve, but in Ireland there traditionally, maybe there is now, but there was no Fairy Queen or May Queen procession at all. And theirs is the most ancient tradition in terms of May Day. So if they don't have it, it's not. The May Queen in England is a girl who resides or walks in front of the parade for May Day celebrations. She wears a white gown to symbolize purity and usually a tiara or a crown. Her duty is to begin the May Day celebrations. She is generally crowned by flowers and sometimes makes a speech before the dancing begins. Our good buddy, Sir James Fraser, speculated that the figure of the May Queen was linked to ancient tree worship, but there's no evidence for this because Fraser was absolutely tree worship mad and he thought everything was ancient tree worship, but there's no tree worship. A number of traditions, however, do link the month of May to the Virgin Mary. So it is possible that she was the Queen of May and she became the May Queen. Alfonso in the 13th century wrote in his Cantigas de Santa Maria, again, sorry for my Spanish, about this special honoring of Mary during specific days in May. Eventually, the entire month was filled with special observances and devotions to Mary. The origin of the conventional May devotion, we still don't know. And according to the National Trust, like many other festivals, May Day was a topsy-turvy day when a lord and lady would be chosen, a lord and lady of misrule would be chosen from among ordinary people who could preside over people for the day. And that's it. So May Kings were originally more popular than May Queens. But there are some theories as to where the idea of this Faerie Queen or May Queen came from. Some believe it's probably just a personification of the holiday that developed over time. Again, perhaps stemming from a Roman goddess of springtime, but there's no continuing tradition of that. It really, however, it does echo like medieval traditions of Maid Marian, who is said to be a personification of the Virgin Mary. She appears as a character in May game festivities and is sometimes associated with the Queen or Lady of May or May Day. In Jim Lee's The Quest for Robin Hood, he suggests that Maid Marian was originally the Virgin Mary. And Maid Marian is not mentioned in any of the early medieval versions of Robin Hood. She was the subject, but she was the subject of 2 May Day plays by 1600. And as we said, in Roman Catholic tradition, Virgin Mary is known as the Queen of May.
Okay.
And that's it. May Queens, however, even fell out of fashion at one point and just saw a resurgence in the Victorian era due to the popularity of Lord Alfred Tennyson's poem, The May Queen. Yeah. So, no.
Yeah.
That's that.
Okay.
So, here is the big question mark.
Yep.
Since we were talking about May Kings, is the Green Man a pagan figure? I know what you're gonna say. I could see it. I could see the twinkle in your eye.
The thing is, what I really want, Michelle, is here's what I really want. Is I want you to record a little video that can be put into maybe on a QR code link that can go next to every green man. It just starts off with people won't even know necessarily what it's connected to. They'll just go, "What's this?" Starts off with wrong, and then just goes into the Green Man is, and I'm going to say for this reason, it is a pagan figure, but it's not the one you think it is.
What do you mean by that before I start shouting?
Well, I do believe, because I do listen, I do believe that it's possibly from the Asian subcontinent and a figure that's traveled to Europe by other means.
You're such a good boy, Mark. You
Thank
listen.
you.
You listen so nicely, so nicely. And so just for the QR code. Wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Oh no.
No. You are right. So
Okay.
he is
Sorry.
not a pagan figure. For fuck's sake, I don't want to hear it ever again. Ever again. I never want to hear this ever again. Lord help me. I feel like what's his name from The Office going, no, God, please, no. Every time I see this on a YouTube short, on a tickety talk, on whatever,
on a tic-tac-toe,
I immediately want to take the phone and throw it against the wall. There are reasons why he is conflated with other characters. We will talk about them all and we will get it done. And I never want to hear. You can't see it. I actually have a Green Man figure on my wall. So not that I hate the Green Man, not at all. I love him as a character. I think he's wonderful. He is not who you think he is. And please, for anybody's sake, for the sake of the gods, for the sake of Jesus, whatever you believe in, please stop spreading the misinformation that this started in the 1930s. It is not true. It has never been true. And it really needs to die. And I blame a lot of woo. I blame a lot of and the American New Age movement as well has done a lot of harm when it comes to what is actually pagan. and he is not. Okay, that is the preface.
If anyone was ever going to become Ringu, I think it'd be just crawling
I
out
will
of the screen.
I will anytime somebody says the word that the Grieve Man is an ancient pagan figure, I will crawl through the screen and eat your toes. That is what I will do. Okay. So but let's as the kids say, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
He was mistaken.
Yes.
He was mistaken for the
Yes.
character of the Jack in the Green,
Yes.
who is a long-standing part of May Day celebrations and is sometimes in the Queen's retinue. But he is not pagan, and the Jack in the Green is not pagan either.
No.
Lady Raglan, oh Lord, Lady Raglan, was the one who suggested that the Jack in the Green and the Green Man were the same character, and that they were ancient fertility gods. And that has never, ever been true. She was not a historian. She was not an archaeologist. She was somebody who took Sir James Fraser's words at face value and tried to look at motifs, and especially medieval motifs, which she did not understand, and didn't even, in some cases, as we'll see here, she didn't even check the medieval sources because she didn't know how, and just automatically assumed that things were pagan when they weren't. So the Jack in the Green tradition developed in England during the 18th century, kids. 18th century, we have records of the Jack in the Green, okay?
Yep.
Records.
Yep.
It emerged from an older May Day tradition, one that was recorded in 17th century. Okay? 17th century, this is modern period already, okay?
Yeah.
In which milkmaids carried milk pails that had been decorated with flowers and other objects that were part of the procession. Increasingly, the decorated milk pails were replaced with objects that were worn on the head. And by the latter half of the 18th century, the tradition had been adopted by other professional groups such as bunters and specifically chimney sweeps.
Yes.
The earliest known account of the Jack in the Green, written, we have the account. The earliest known account of the Jack in the Green came from a description of a London May Day procession in 1770. Okay? 1770.
Yep. Yep.
That's that bit.
Yep. Which
Second
notably
yes.
is early modern. Yeah.
Early modern, yes.
Yeah.
The distinct image of the Green Man is a motif originally developed in India, which traveled through the medieval Arab Empire to Christian Europe. There, it became a decoration for monks' manuscripts, which spread to churches, which is why you'll see his image on the church. The Jack in the Green was studied by Roy Judge in 1979 and proved to have appeared in London at the end of the 18th century. This was initially, as we said, a figure of chimney sweep processions and has no connection to the Green Man on the wall. Okay? A definitive study in 1997 was shown that they are two completely different derivatives. It's very tempting to say that they look very similar and that they are the same thing. But we know as well that the Jack in the Green, even though he wasn't called that, men dressed in green leaves was prevalent in Tudor and Stuart pageants. But again, pageant plays, not specifically linked to May Day, Beltane, no. None of these things had anything to do with each other, and neither one is a pagan god. The Jack in the Green became the leader of chimney sweeps. And even though so there are other traditions, like in northern Spain, of los trapajones, where they do look like decorated green figures. Same thing with the German Strohbären, but they are not related at all. In The Golden Bough, Sir James Fraser described many examples of straw effigies being made in late winter times or early spring, mainly during Lent, to represent either carnival or the death of winter. As we said with the Green George, right, that's drowned as well. Other people made rushes or May boughs that were burned as well. That's it. So 1770 is the earliest that we have of the Jack of the Green.
Yes.
And I don't want to fucking hear it anymore. That is the end. I'm clipping this and you can play it to your friends. That's that. Okay?
Oh.
As well, as I said, as I always say, we have this stupid need as humans to say that something is so old and that it's extant tradition and oh, we need to say it doesn't matter if it's a new tradition. It doesn't matter. It's a new thing that we do that's cool. You know, like we talked about this during Christmas with Krampus. How now Krampus is we have Krampuslauf here in Canada now. We never
Yeah.
had Krampus. Not our tradition. I don't care. I love Krampus. I'll gladly take him on and hug him at night. I love Krampus. I am the first person to admit that he is not a Canadian pagan tradition.
No.
Get out of
No.
here. Like that's ridiculous. Very silly. So once again, earliest Jack of the Green, written 1770. The Green Man motif came from India, was used on churches. Neither one of these is a Celtic pagan god.
No.
And when people say this, I go, okay, which Celtic pagan god is it? You don't fucking know. You don't know. Which one?
No.
Is it Bel? Is it? The one I hear is Kurnanos. I go, all right. Where's his horns?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
You don't know. Liars. You don't know.
No, you don't know. Don't know nothing. Wow. I've got to say, I feel as though, you could, you could put so many wrongs right with that energy. You know, just put people, just put certain people who need told something in a room with you, and just get them to say, "Green Man." You know,
I would immediately say, sit down.
Yeah, exactly.
Sit down. Here is the source. Where are your sources?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And this poor person just like, I don't know. I've only been brought to the local court for shoplifting. I don't know why I'm here. Sit down.
It was the same. It was the same thing, you know. When you sent me that video about somebody saying that Yostra, you know, was an ancient pagan goddess who had two bunnies, and the eggs were associated with her. And immediately,
well, and then the estrogen connection as well. Yeah.
Oh, oh God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. Estrogen is a modern word. In late 1800s.
Yeah. Yeah.
The anger.
Yeah.
Oh, but this is why I don't respond to those things, because I will be too angry. And people who say those things don't want to listen anyway. So even though I have so much rage bottled up whenever I hear people say, oh, the Green Man is an ancient pagan god, and he is now the person. Or like when I hear people saying things like, oh, the Holly King is a progenitor, was what Santa was based on. And I go, the Holly King was made up in the 1970s. We have the story, and we know that they made him up, specifically the American New Age movement made him up to give people like something else to look at other than Santa.
Yeah,
we know he's made up.
Yeah.
And even partially appropriated from old rural customs in Europe, like Los Trapajones, where they do have somebody who's dressed in holly and ivy. And I sit there and I just go, I hate, and I hate, and I hate. From a Tori Amos song, but where she just sits there, and I hate, and I do, and I can't stand it. I can't stand this whole where people just parrot these things. And again, you just go, oh, is that true? And just do a little bit of. I hate when you say, oh, I've done my own research. There's a very big difference between doing peer-reviewed research, or research that has been peer-reviewed by other people, and you can now have access to it on academia sites, where you can compare and contrast people's research, right? There is that creative thinking, versus I went to Time Magazine, and Time Magazine said that Anglo-Saxons were the original people who made hot cross buns, when we literally have the original recipe from fucking St. Albans.
So all of this is going to be attached to that QR code, I guess.
It's just going to be me shouting random things for people. going, hello.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Green Man is not pagan.
Yeah.
We have lady. I was recently talking to a different Mark from the folklore podcast, and he asked me. I believe he asked me about the Wild Hunt and Santa. And so I said, I'm very sorry, but we talked about certain things, and I said,
Hmm.
I'm very sorry, but a lot of that was made up by Lady Raglan, and immediately his reply was, "Oh, Lady Raglan, not again, not
Yeah,
again."
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's almost like you're chasing certain people, from room to room, and every time you get into the room, they've already gone. You know.
Well,
Yeah,
or like somebody who is like infected with the plague, and then they keep running from room to room, just touching people on the shoulder,
yeah,
and you're just
yeah,
trying to chase them to stop them. And it's just,
yeah.
but this is why I don't do. I
Folklore
very,
Mary.
oh, I can't. Oh God.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah, yeah,
typhoid.
exactly.
Yeah.
Typhoid Mary. I do feel bad for her though, because I mean, Typhoid Mary, her story is actually a very sad one. She was
Yeah,
totally fine, and she just wanted to work and
and
make
make
a
nice
living.
puddings. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm,
it was just very sad. But
mm.
anyway, that's why I admire people like the biblical scholar Dan McClellan, who knows a lot more. Well, maybe I know almost as much about the Old Testament as he does, because I was forced to learn it in 3 languages. But
Wow.
certainly he is one of the preeminent scholars on the Bible in general, and especially the New Testament, along with Dr. Helen Bond. And something that I admire about both of them very much is they just have the ability to very calmly state certain things about Christianity, and they go, okay, well, here's the text, and this is why we're not sure if Matthew or Luke is correct, etc. We don't
Mm,
really know.
mm.
Just their ability to say things calmly to people who are shouting at them
Yeah.
and spreading misinformation, because I don't have that talent. And so
No.
therefore I abstain, and I don't say anything. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe I shouldn't, but I can't do it. I can't do it with no emotion. I can't.
No. No.
Um, so
And I am and I am not sorry.
and clip. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Uh, oh, I was gonna go straight into another pagan topic, but let's quickly move on to Robin Hood.
Okay.
What does Robin Hood have to do with May Day, Mark?
Uh, I don't know.
Uh,
Although I'm going to guess,
okay.
is it something to do with the story of the competition that he enters, the archery competition?
Ooh, very good, Mark. Yes.
Yeah.
Many characters that are associated with the idea of Merry England became popular in May Day plays, just like Robin. Exactly. May Day
Okay.
festivities have been long associated with Robin Hood's folklore, and the character of Robin Hood and both Maid Marian were crowned
Hmm.
in Tudor celebrations as May King and May Queen. As well as you just said, as well as in the ballads, the legend was also transmitted by Robin Hood games or plays that were an important part of the late medieval in early modern May Day festivities. The first record of Robin Hood of a Robin Hood game, rather, was in 1426 in Exeter. But the reference does not indicate how old or widespread this custom was at the time. Robin Hood games are known to have flourished in the later 15th and 16th centuries. It is commonly stated as fact that Maid Marian and a jolly friar entered the legend through the May games.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
in in Professor Ronald Hutton's The Rise and Fall of Merry England, he states May Day 1515 was Robin Hood's big extravaganza. Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon were met by 200 men dressed as Robin Hood and his band of merry men. Robin was not always a spirit of the forest, though, or good. In early legends, he was a regular outlaw and stole from the church. And whether
Right.
that's good or not, that's up to you.
Mm.
The figure of Robin obviously served many functions in summer revels. He was a lord of misrule and always associated with the woodland as well.
Hmm. So this this notion then of Robin sort of reaching a sort of a okay, that's quite an appearance to turn up with 200
Yeah, it was a
people.
biggie. That was a
Is it
biggie.
is it akin to a jester? Because in that sense, he's a figure of
Yes,
he's an anti-hero, he's anti-authority, isn't he?
yes.
Turning up in front of the king. Hmm.
Yeah, so he and obviously Maid Marian in many they're the as well the Lord and Lady of Misrule for the season.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So
Yeah.
now to
Okay.
answer your other question, Mark,
Mm-hmm.
are maypoles pagan?
Um.
Just say it. Just say it.
No,
Say it.
I've already had a good boy once,
You
so
did.
I'm gonna say they're not.
Correct, they're not. And they are not based on a shower of poles. I don't care what anybody says. I've heard this too many times. There's no,
Uh-huh.
no, no. Wrong time of year, wrong part of the world. Absolutely not. As
Okay.
well, unlike what popular opinion might have you think, they're not meant to be phallic symbols at all. It was Freud
Yeah.
that said they were phallic symbols, and
Yeah.
no. The
Phallic
pure,
symbol. Phallic symbol. Yeah.
yeah, said the man who liked putting phalluses in his mouth. The Puritans also claimed that it was phallic, but no. Our good buddy Ronald Hutton concurs with Swedish scholar Carl Wilhelm, who stated that maypoles were erected simply as signs that the happy season of warmth and comfort had returned. Their shape allowed for garlands
Mm-hmm.
to be hung from them, and were seen, at least in the British Isles, between 1350 and 400 within the context of medieval Christian European culture. In
Mm.
1588, at the Holy Church in Exeter, villagers gathered around the summer rod, as they called it, for feasting and drinking. Chaucer also mentions that it was a particularly large maypole stood at St. Andrew's Undershaft.
Oh my goodness me.
So good. Which
And
was
you even said that they're erected. I mean, like, yeah, ugh, yeah, okay, fine. Yep.
hey, I don't make the rule. These are
Not
what the words
phallic.
mean. These
Not
are what the
phallic.
words mean. This is what the
Yeah.
words mean. Okay. Ribbons were brought to England from Sicily in
Right.
1836. So they were not, they originally did not have ribbons in England. The maypole, as we know it, with the ribbon holding dances, are Victorian. Some people
Yeah.
theorize that maypoles began in Germanic countries and spread outward because they have the earliest versions of them. But there's no scholarly agreement on who had them first. Some people try to claim that this is either a representation of Thor's oak or Yggdrasil, but people in northern Scandinavian countries don't even have these. So nope,
No.
there's no
No.
evidence for this. Ronald Hutton states there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the maypole was regarded as a reflection of either one of these trees. Anthropologist Mircea Eliade, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, theorizes that maypoles were simply part of general rejoicing at the return of summer and the growth of new vegetation. In this way, more similarities with May Day garlands, which were common festival practice
Mm.
already.
Mm.
It's a contemporary creation, maybe drawn on ancient traditions, but they're nobody from the mid-11th century until the Romantic movement had maple. Sorry.
No. No.
That's that. Although elements endured in Christianity, pagan communities only started to establish continuous traditions in the early 20th century. As well, maypoles or celebration poles were used for other holidays in Germany that had nothing to do with May Day. They were erected at Whitsun and even in midsummer as well. It was the Puritans really who labeled them as pagan and tried to abolish May Day, and they did abolish. They made maypoles illegal, but they were restored by Charles II in 1660.
Well, at least he was doing the important stuff. Um, no, it's interesting, isn't it? Because again, this all goes back to this whole theme of people do things that are fun
Yeah,
at
exactly,
at
exactly.
important times, and so dancing around a pole. Um, but also this, I mean, this is a broader issue. But why is it always Puritans who see this stuff everywhere? Like it's always it's the people.
It's the same reason I think that Lady Raglan, though she had good intent, I think
Mm,
it's the same thing that she looked at, foliate heads or gargoyles and went, oh, that must be pagan,
mm,
because it
mm.
wasn't in Christian imagery at the time. So she thought, oh, it must be a pagan thing.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I think, as you say, art is just art and people are just people.
Mm,
I don't think that there needs to be a Christian or pagan anything. I
no.
think folklore, it's just folklore. That's it.
Mm, mm.
So speaking of folklore, Mark, last question.
Okay.
Last question. Ready?
Yep.
What is your favorite color? No. What does the Wicker Man have to do with May Day?
absolutely gosh darn nothing.
Fuck all, exactly. It was Sweet Fanny Adams. It is made up
Yeah.
by the movie, which is a good movie, but it completely made up. There is a theory that possibly there never even was a Wicker Man. The legend
Yeah.
emerged from a handful of Roman writings
Hmm.
on Northern European tribes, and they were hostile reports that could be seen as negative propaganda. Julius Caesar was the one who started this idea in his book, which he may or may not have written. We don't know.
Hmm.
Commentary on the Gallic War, which might have been either written by him or finished by somebody else, we're not sure. Main evidence for this practice is just one sentence, chapter 16, which says, they have sacrifices of that kind ordained for national purposes. Others have figures of vast size, which limbs are formed of osiers and filled with living men, which are set on fire. The men perish in the enveloped flames. Rome used this as an accusation as well against Christians and Jews of human sacrifice, but we know Christians and Jews didn't do this.
Hmm.
So we don't know if Druids did this as well. The
No.
answer is probably not. We don't have archaeological evidence for it either. There is archaeological evidence for killing, but we don't know if that was there's it's possible it's not ritual sacrifice and that it's just judicial verdicts,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's how it just went. There is no evidence for mass body burning at all. Some
No,
sources say that
you would see evidence. There'd be charcoal, there'd be burned deposits, there'd be
bones,
lipids from and fat, so bones, yeah, and
right?
there'd be residue.
And there, some sources say in Ireland, sacrifices of fire were made from a pyre of bones, symbolizing the birth of the new season. But these sacrifices were poppets; they were straw or rushes
Yeah.
made of rushes,
Mm,
and they call them makings. But
mm,
there's no people, right?
no.
The one image that we have of the Wicker Man comes from a single illustration in a 17th century book on the history of Britain.
Yeah.
The burning of the maybush and bough are popular customs, but obviously they're not made into man shapes and they're not people. Effigies of St. George, as we said,
Hmm.
were put into water at this time of year, but they're not burned.
No. No.
No.
Uh, that 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 reminds me though of stories about the idea the Great Wall of China, for example, was built
Oh,
by
yeah.
slaves whose remains were buried in the wall.
No.
It's and the reason why it reminds me of it is that it's the grimness
Mm-hmm.
uh, actually overrides the practicality. You don't want a cavity in your wall. You don't want it to collapse because someone's rotted away. And
Mm-hmm.
the same goes for burning people alive on that scale, I should say. It's really hard to burn a body. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually really difficult to get it going and to keep it going and not just have all the liquids and
It
gases and
has
stuff
to be
just
very hot and
yeah
continuous. Yeah.
and not have it just extinguish the fire. So it's one of those reasons.
We're juicy. Mm.
Yeah, yeah, we're very juicy, but also but the uh yeah, the practicalities of developing that sort of enveloping it in that sort of heat uh would be very impractical, and it make in that sense it makes for a good story, I guess.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
does. I've heard that as well about the pyramids of Egypt, saying that
yeah,
it's built on, Nubian and Jewish body, or rather, I should say Israelite
yeah,
bodies, but no, like
no,
there's no archaeological evidence for that whatsoever.
no.
So, Mark, how did you do?
Well, you were really pulling ahead at one point. This time, 14 to me, 10 to you, if I've notched that up correctly.
And
Uh,
guess what, Mark?
what?
For winning, you get the gift of
Extra reading!
yay!
Yay!
Supernatural queens, Faerie Queens as well.
Uh-huh.
There's a wonderful book about that. The Queens of the Wild and Pagan Britain and the Rise and Fall of Merry England, all by Ronald Hutton. The Conversion of Britain by Barbara York as well. Christians and Pagans by Malcolm Lambert. And
Hmm.
as well, the National Trust has a wonderful history of May Day. And so does and History Extra also has a wonderful history of maypoles. And Gresham College has a wonderful talk that was given by Professor Ronald Hutton about this very thing.
Hmm.
So I do encourage everybody to go there and take a look and just enjoy all the further reading. Mark, you did so well today. You did so well. And you
Thank you.
got out of me the Green Man rants that you have been begging for like the last year.
Do it, do it. Was it? Well,
Let,
it's
let,
the
let the anger nourish you.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah, yeah. The branches have grown out of your rich passion, shall
Yes.
we say? Yeah,
And as we say, there is a Green George. There is a tradition of a Green George being drowned, but that is only in certain areas in Central and Eastern Europe,
yeah.
and absolutely zero connection to England or anything like it. Sorry, kids.
Grand. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for being here. And I hope you have a happy May Day.